Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. Welcome to our live Texans Dolphins postgame show. Robert, along with Sports Radio 610, Shaun Bijani, who's at NRG, just came from the locker room. And Shaun, this was the exact opposite from the first game. The defense gave up nearly 400 yards. Looked a lot like last year, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Big plays being made, today by the Dolphins. I kind of lost count in the first half, to be honest with you, in terms of the number of plays that they had over 10 yards. They had that 65-yard touchdown run by Salvin Ahmed, who looked fantastic today, to his credit. From a Texans point of view, you want to give those guys their props and stuff like that. But, I felt like in terms of missed tackles, not wrapping up, not taking good pursuit, good angles, hand placement, from stuff on the defensive line, a lot of those little things really showed today. Just a lack of execution, I think, is how you can put it in a nutshell when it comes to the Texans defensively. But one thing in terms of, a positive that we saw a complete opposite from today from last week, and really over the course of these joint practices with the Dolphins, CJ Stroud had a little bit more time to throw, and he looked really accurate, made some plays with his feet. So in that regard, I'll take that opposite. I liked what I saw from him today.
Yeah, we're going to get to CJ in a bit. I want everybody out there that's watching us, get in the comments. We want to hear from you. You can comment. We can look at it. We'll put it up on the screen. If you got something really good to say, good question, let us know about it. Shaun, everybody's wondering, where was Tank Dell? What did you hear from the locker room?
Well, I saw Tank in the locker room afterwards. He looked fine, was in good spirits. CJ was headed to the podium, and he was like, "Hey, CJ, I'm going to call you. We need to talk. I'm going to call you." So they got some things to go over, I'm sure. But look, CJ was out. He was dressed, warming up with the team, and then he had street clothes on. And so nobody knew what the deal was. After the game, we come to find out that CJ was experiencing some tightness in a leg. Don't know which one. But as a precaution, D'Amico Ryans, Texans just decided to hold him out. I didn't see anything wrapped up, bandaged up. I didn't even notice if he was wearing a compression sleeve or anything like that. But again, just judging by what little I did see of him, it was a couple minutes in the locker room. Looked fine, sounded fine, was moving around okay. I just think it's precaution. We were talking in the press box, amongst different people when, we realized, hey, Tank's not going to play today. We saw him in street clothes after seeing him in full uniform. Maybe they just feel like they'd seen enough from him, because I personally feel like I don't know what else I need to see, really, to be honest with you, because he was the most targeted receiver and the most successful receiver in these joint practices against the Dolphins. And literally since day one that he stepped foot on an NFL practice field, he's been one of the best guys out there, one of the most consistent guys out there. So personally, I've seen enough. And
Shaun, I wanted to see him just because I just feel like the more we see CJ with the actual offense and getting him in that rhythm,
Yeah, I totally get that. I get that. And it's not a bad thing, but I kind of dumbed it down. I was like, you know what? Well, Dameon Pierce didn't get any run last week because they know what he can do. But I think they saw that, hey, we need to get CJ some look with some ones, but we also got to be cautious as well, which at the end of the day, they were cautious with Tank. Hey, feeling a little tight. Well, clearly there's no need to push this guy or really anybody at this stage because, look, you're still 4 weeks away from September 10th, week 1 against Baltimore. So let's not be silly about things. You saw Dameon get run today, and clearly he needs to work on some things in terms of picking up, the blocks and a pass rush, protecting his quarterback. The offensive line isn't perfect, even though you did see your starting offensive line, at least projected as such, week 1, minus Titus Howard, who, hey, update on him. He got rid of the hard cast already. which I think he only wore that darn thing for about a week. So he was in like a soft wrap today, which is a good sign. Looking like if that's the case, he should be ready for week 1. But I think it's a fine line. We're seeing how they play it. Look, some of these things don't make sense to us, but I'm going to trust the coaches. Yeah, that's all you can really do is trust the coaches. They see these guys and know their capabilities day in and day out, unlike the rest of us. So I thought today needed to be about John Mechie from the slot, and he didn't get as much run as I thought he needed, as I thought he would get. That is a little bit of a concern. I think for a lot of people that have just been reading reports and hearing things from training camp, getting a chance to see Robert Woods catch balls from CJ Stroud, I think was nothing but a good thing. Stroud was extremely accurate, and Woods, I think, showed you exactly what he's still very capable of as a consistent pass catcher on this team.
First play from scrimmage, Denzel Perryman with an interception, but after that, Stroud, the 3rd and goal from the 1. There's a delay of game, and then 2 straight incompletions. The delay of game, that's, rookie coach, rookie offensive coordinator, rookie quarterback. It all looked very familiar if you're a Texans fan. Then the first incompletion, due to an unblocked defender, Dameon Pierce whiffed on. I think that's what you're referring to with him. The second looked, Shaun, like a miscommunication on the route between Stroud and Schultz, because if Schultz had kept going to that corner, it might have been a touchdown.
Yeah, clear miscommunication. And if you notice, you were watching the game, CJ Stroud immediately ran over to Schultz, and they talked about exactly what had happened. And I don't know whose fault it was. I didn't go to the podium today where CJ Stroud was after the game, and Dalton Schultz was not seen nor heard from in the locker room afterward. But yeah, I mean, you chalk it up to a miscommunication, and that's something that we've constantly heard about CJ Stroud. When a mistake like that is made, he's right on top of it to fix it, and he's not going to make that mistake again. It's just about that familiarity, that chemistry, getting on the same page. Instead, that didn't even look like a real route that Schultz ran. Typically when you see a guy stop like that, it's on a stop, kind of a comeback. It looked like he just kind of gave up on the play to me. I have to go back and rewatch it.
Well, the other thing is it's a 4th and goal. So if you don't get in the end zone, he stopped 2 yards short of the end zone, and there was a defender right behind him. So if he caught the ball where he stood, and maybe the defender wasn't supposed to be there based on a route combo or something like that. But if he catches the ball where he should, he's going to be stopped anyway. He's probably not getting in the end zone. I mean, I know Schultz might be able to, break a tackle or something like that, but it would have been tough because his back was to the defender.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But, look, from what we've all seen in Dalton Schultz, in the last few years as a member of the Dallas Cowboys, and really some things that I've noticed from him, particularly in training camp, he'll get you that extra couple of yards after the catch. He's so darn strong and can kind of sink his hips and leverage his body and get that extra little push. I would have liked to have seen that. You saw it actually earlier. He caught 3 other balls today. And on a couple of them, in which I think, it was the one, I think it might have been the first pass that Schultz caught. Stroud took a little bit of a rush, and he kind of pumped and then had to adjust his arm angle and throw it over the top. And Schultz kind of did a little stutter in his route, which caused 2 defenders to kind of crash down on him. He kind of anchored down and lowered his shoulder and ended up getting a couple of more yards out. That's kind of what I was hoping to see develop on that 4th and goal situation. Obviously we didn't. And you know what? I don't know if the delay of game was on, Stroud, if it was on Slowick, just the communication. Again, first time play caller, it's a quick turnaround. Maybe you don't have the play that you really like in that situation ready. Those are all things that are possibilities that definitely need to be worked on.
Yeah, and Adam mentions the rushing yards, and we're going to get to that later because that stat was going to come up for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure if anybody looked at the stats, you noticed it. We're going to talk about it in a second, but let's go to that second Stroud drive because he's 5 for 6. Yeah. It's really the definitive drive of him for the preseason so far. It leads to a field goal. The one incompletion was on 3rd down. Stroud's pass was on the money to Noah Brown. Xavier Howard made a really nice last-second deflection, Shaun.
Yeah, it was a really good throw again by Stroud, who showed you just how accurate he is on that drive. He threw some terrific balls to Nico Collins, Noah Brown, Robert Woods, just on the money. Balls where only they could get to him, where he was leading them in their route, whether it be a crosser, an out, or a dig. That ball that you're talking about, it was a good throw, but a much better play. From Xavier Howard, who had a rough day at practice on Wednesday. The Texans were routinely
Oh
cooking.
yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, this was the accuracy that we just didn't see from Davis Mills the last couple of years. If anybody forgot, he would miss guys by 5 or 10 yards on a 5 or 10 yard throw last year. And
Yeah.
CJ Stroud I don't see him doing that unless there has been a miscommunication or a pass rush that's maybe rushed him a little bit so far in the preseason. We're
Yeah.
not seeing that. And, the big thing for me, Sean, is somebody said, oh, his numbers look the same accuracy wise as Davis Mills. Oh, they're worse because he was 7 of 12. Watch the game, guys. Watch the game, because we just talked about the first drive. We had the basically the miscommunication on one play. We had the Dameon Pierce, which basically made him have to throw the ball away really quick or he was going to get sacked. You had the Noah Brown dropping the pass. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that's going on that he had nothing to do with.
Yeah.
That, and boom, boom, boom. I think there was only one pass that I would say I was a little bit off. I think it was one to Nico or something like that, but that was it.
Yeah, that one, and maybe and then look, the pass rush contributed to it. I think it was the attempt on that first series to Andrew Beck, which it wasn't even in the same zip code as
Yeah,
Andrew
no,
Beck.
that's the one I mentioned to start with, but I want to say maybe the third or fourth drive, there was one to Nico that it just
Yeah.
seemed like he was just a hair off on that one. So I
Yeah.
mean, if you look at and you talk about and Adam brings this up, and I'll pull up what he says. He said he looked good just considering the offensive. I thought the offensive line wasn't bad, and I think you did too. But he said the drop passes by third string receivers. Well, Noah Brown, second string receiver. Remember that play where he rolls it? I mean, basically, he has a guy in his face immediately, unblocked,
The
rolls
bootleg.
out left. Yeah, he not bootleg that he was supposed to make. It was a bootleg that he had to make. And he's running left, and he throws it 15 or 20 yards down the field. And Noah Brown's got to, NFL receivers got to make that catch. Bottom line.
Oh yeah, that was the one that was really low, and he slid. I mean, it hit him right in the chest. It was a hell of a throw. After spinning out of that pass rush to extend that play. You're right. I remember that one, and it's a hell of a throw to make, but it's still a very difficult play for Noah Brown to make on an extended play like that. It's those are plays that are going to be made that just come with time. The more CJ Stroud experiences that, the more he has to show his elusiveness, the more he has to show what he can do off script like that. That's just going to come with time. And look, Noah's an experienced receiver. He'll tell you right now today, you know what? I should have made that catch. 7-year veteran, he should make that catch. He's looking at himself like, hey, you know what? I'm an ascending guy in this league. I should be able to make that play. I got to be there for my quarterback when he makes a great play to extend something like that for me. So, yeah, that's just going to come with time. I'm not going to kill either one of those guys for that.
We always talk about it, Sean. This is the difference between being in the NFL and not being in the NFL. If you get both hands on the ball, you're supposed to catch it, unless it hits a fingertip or something like that. And it's a little bit high and whatever. But, typically if you get both hands on it, unless somebody's there to knock it out, which I don't think anybody knocked it out of Noah's hands, you're supposed to catch it.
No.
And, that's why the Texans receiving core, everybody's very skeptical of it, because these guys are not guys that everybody trusts a lot, as far as making plays. We're talking about making plays, not just, making a routine catch.
But, Brown had a really good catch on the design bootleg where Stroud had to roll out. It was a 14-yard gain. Got 2 feet in real quick on that right sideline. That was a tremendous play, great ball placement. It was it was about as good as you could get. And, more times than not, when CJ Stroud puts it where it's supposed to be, his receivers in camp so far, and certainly today on that drive, they've made the play. So to me, that's encouraging. What I needed to see from CJ Stroud today to make me feel comfortable after very limited action last week, 11 snaps, just 2 of 4 through the air. You didn't get to see much at all. I needed to see a sustained drive. I didn't necessarily need to see him go score a touchdown. I didn't need to see him play, the whole first half like he did. And I'm glad he did. I'm glad he got opportunities to go out there and build off of mistakes, but build off of successes as well, which I also think is important. I needed to see him sustain a drive, go through those adversities within a drive and just kind of recoup, readjust, and just go. And we saw that. I mean, 11 plays. What did it take? 6-7 minutes or something like that. 8-minute drive, I think. The 11 play, 61-yard drive. Maybe it was a little bit more. I can't remember. For the 35-yard field goal, that was huge to me. I don't know. We'll see what the rest of this, what next week kind of shows us in the joint practices with the Saints. But he may not get another look in the third preseason game. This may be it. You don't see him again until September 10th. And that's just going to be the way that it is. There's so much time, but he's QB1, man. They haven't said it. They're probably not going to make this big announcement, but he's QB1, and it kind of confirmed it for me today, just in that drive alone.
Yeah, D'Amico said there's nothing new on that front, but he also said he liked what he saw from Stroud today, and not a lot of good came out of this game, but two guys that matter the most. We know who they are. Obviously, Stroud, who had the moments, and then Will Anderson, who blew up that Dolphins' third possession, trucking the running back, causing the Tua fumble, all in one motion, Sean. That was one of the definitive plays that we've seen in the preseason.
Just first wow play in the NFL for the Texans, and it was a hell of a one. I can only imagine what he was thinking, and he kind of gave us a little, a peek behind the curtain, what was going through his head. When the tight end left in motion, going right to left. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen Will Anderson in college come off the edge just untouched. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're just giving this guy free reign, and then to have, who is it? I think it was Salvin Ahmed. Nice day for the Dolphins, but not on that play. I mean, he just might have well gotten out of the way and just straight up olayed Will Anderson, but he just plowed over Ahmed and into Skylar Thompson, forcing the fumble. And that was fantastic. Anderson was asked, like, hey, what's it like seeing that there's just a running back between you and a quarterback? And he's like, hey, man, they designed the play. They knew what was coming, and they made that decision. That's on them. And I think you already know this, but it was just kind of confirmed for you once again today, because he's been doing this in camp. He's just a disruptor. He's going to be a problem in the backfield. And you know what's a really positive thing? I don't know if you were going to bring this up or not. I think you and I actually discussed this the other day. Like guys that we should be talking about that we're not because they're not standing out at practice. You asked me about Jonathan Grenard. You saw him today. Guy's going to be disruptive. When he's healthy, he's a disruptor for the Texans defensively.
Tackle for loss. That was a big one.
Yeah.
Stroud's third drive fell apart with a bad shotgun snap. Hard to tell if that was on the rookie Juice Scruggs for doing a little bit high, but it hit Stroud in the hands. Probably should have made it. So it was a 3 and out. The fourth drive, we talked about what happened with that one, the Noah Brown play. That's how that drive ends, which, just a lot of drop passes. I mean, I counted maybe 7 or 8 drop passes. Catoriano, I believe, had 2 of them, Sean. It was a lot.
Yeah. You talking about total? Like,
I was like, I was starting to add them up, and it was about 7 or 8.
Yeah, man. It felt like more than that, to be honest with you, watching this one. But you're probably right. And of course, you might be like me. You just kind of lose count of like the big plays, like I did with the Dolphins. Just seem to be reeling them off like every couple of downs. But yeah, and it's disappointing because Teagan's been really consistent as a pass catcher in camp, in limited reps, because that's a stacked room. And, he's been dealing with a little bit of injury. The tight end room's been kind of up and down, Schultz, Tomlinson, Shrek. You've got Dalton Keenan there, Nick Vanett, Teagan Quitoriano. Like that is a position group that is a lot of competition going on. Similarly to the offensive line with the tackle and guard positions, and the drops today, just in general. I mean, they are a concern. But again, let's focus on really the positive here. Your QB1 is CJ Stroud, and the opportunities that he gave his receivers, more times than not, they came down with him and it was on the money. So I think
Davis Mills is the one that should be upset because there was probably 6 drops on Davis Mills. Couturiano had a couple, Steven Sims. I mean, there's a laundry list of guys.
You're right. And I don't mean to gloss over that because to give Davis Mills his, due credit, all camp, you can see the difference in Mills. Like, yes, he still struggles somewhat with his accuracy on some of those intermediate to deeper throws down the field. But on the crossing routes and, these digs, these out routes that are very prevalent in this offense, Mills is showing improvement.
Sean, he looks like a first-round pick right now. If anybody out there is listening, another NFL team, we'll take a couple of first-round picks for Davis Mills. He's looking better and better, man. Come on.
Yeah, I don't know about first-round pick, but he's he's improved. You got to give him his credit. I think it speaks a lot. And look, he should be. I mean, this is a third-year guy, and in this system that is quarterback friendly, and I don't know if I spoke about it with you, this past week or not, but we'd heard Keenum talk about it, and we've heard Slowick talk about it, how friendly the system is. I still didn't really understand why. Like, what is it? It's not the terminology, because the terminology in the system can be very complex, very long, very wordy kind of stuff. What is it that makes this really that friendly? We know it's not the lack of volume of plays. I came to the realization watching these joint practices this week, paying attention, and you saw it today, the creative ways that Bobby Slowick is getting the receivers the ball and how much easier it is for a quarterback to do so. Nico Collins coming in motion, the roundabout bubble screen, the crossing patterns, the digs. The routes are designed to come into the vision of the quarterback, not for the quarterback to scan the entire field, right? The progressions are not necessarily like, okay, left to right or right to left, whatever the case may be. These routes are designed to enter the quarterback's field of vision to where it's very easy for him to see what's coming, what's there, what's not there. If a linebacker's dropping into zone, if he's sinking down on the screen, whatever the case may be. You saw all of those things today, but we've been watching it specifically this past week in camp. I understood it. That's why it's quarterback friendly. And I think the more and more, this was such a huge week because you're watching a Mike McDaniel coached offense that their defense sees this all the time. Their defense was prepared for CJ Stroud and this offense this week. You saw him once, twice, and on the third time, CJ Stroud probably looked as good as he had at any point, in my opinion, throwing the ball to his receivers. That is a huge plus.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I want to move to the defensive side of the ball for a second. We'll talk about the general stuff. Before I do that, linebacker Henry To'oTo'o, we heaped praise on him in the first game for being in all the right spots, but he looked lost in this one, Sean.
One really stood out to me, and it was the touchdown that Berrios caught on him. And that was a play that took a little bit of time to develop. I think Skylar Thompson had gotten flush from the pocket, had to extend the play a little bit. It's a tough ask for any linebacker to, cover for that long. However, To'oTo'o is an athlete. We know that he's got the propensity to do that. That is a ball, that is a play that he's at least got to contest better than. I mean,
it wasn't just that though, Sean. It was on the run plays. I was watching him and they were gashing the Texans, and we're going to get to the numbers on that in a second. But he was picking bad angles. He was running into offensive. He looked like the linebackers that we've seen with the Texans. Like I said, this looked like the old school Texans, and he was a big part of that because he came into the game in the second quarter. This is not somebody that was with everybody else in Davis Mills in the third quarter.
Yeah.
He was there earlier in the game, and he's a guy that you're gashed to the running game. That's the guy. He's the responsibility. And and that's an issue.
You're right, but it was an issue for every linebacker today. Jake Hansen looked absolutely horrendous. Even Denzel Perryman, who, had the great play on the first play of the game with the interception and near pick six. Look, he missed a tackle today that he should have had on a run over the left side. Running back cuts back, hits the middle. Jalen Petrie nearly had 2 missed tackles today. Seeing a lot of bad angles, a lot of reaching, arm tackling. That's a problem. And
I don't want to hear the greatness of Jalen Petrie until he starts making tackles, man.
Well, that's something that obviously has to improve. Now he's great in a lot of other areas. We know that. Dude's been a ball hawk and shown some vast improvement there. And he was already really good coming in. But
if you're a good ball hawk and a guy that's going to get an interception, you're lucky if you get 1 per game. Tackles, you're going to have to do a lot more. And if you can't do that well, that's bad.
You are. But because, the defensive line did such a bad job of setting the edge today, they got loose a number of times on the edge. Early on, you go back to that I think it was the first play of the second series. It was Malik Collins. It was Jacob Martin. And I want to say Will Anderson was in on it as well.
Oh yeah, he was in there. You talking about where they got him at the 1 or 2?
It was the TFL.
But it was also that's a Miami mess up too. They looked like they didn't know what they were doing on that one. So
my point is the very next play, Ahmed came right back and gashed him up the middle for 7 yards.
Yeah.
And that kind of, to me, established like the tone. It was like, we got to tighten up here. And you saw a lot of over pursuing on the edge, guys not playing with their eyes up, not sealing. And you saw a number of times in the next drive, and they went on that really long, like 82-yard drive, I think on their third series. They were hitting right edge, left tackle, middle, cut back, and just kind of bouncing stuff. Now, again, Ahmed had a fantastic day. Mostert, had some good plays today as well. It's no excuse. Sheldon Rankins talked about it afterwards, and he said something very honest. We're asking him about, hey, what's going on with the run defense, because it's looked really good to this point in camp. What did you see today? He didn't say this, but I'm thinking to myself, keep in mind, this is the third time, the Dolphins are seeing what the Texans are doing defensively. And somebody is going to have an advantage, to some degree. The Texans had theirs early. The Dolphins had theirs, a little bit later and more consistent. But Rankins was like, it's no excuse, but just fundamentally did a horrible job of setting the edge. We did a horrible job of our hand placement, not getting off of blocks, not sitting in our gaps, and just things that guys should know better. That is a little concerning to me for a defense, and you hear DeMeco Ryans talk about it all the time. Fundamentals. When everything else fails, that you can rely and, rest your cap on fundamentals. You'll always have that to go back to. And I think you just saw so many fundamental mistakes today, from the D-line to the linebackers to just simple tackles that should be made, runs that should have gone for 2 that went for 16, that went for 13. The 65-yard run, that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And I think, yes, it's a concern until it's not. But again, this wasn't going to be a flip the switch kind of a thing. Yes, they're improved talent-wise, schematically. They're a much better coached team. They've got some dogs out there. It's just going to take a little bit of time. I still think it's going to be improved, but maybe pump the brakes on anticipating this run defense being top 20, top 15 this season, at least right off the bat.
No question about that. The Texans 2 of 12 on third down. The Dolphins 9 of 14 on third down. And just to punctuate the difference between the Dolphins and the Texans, 205 rushing yards to 32 for the Texans for 2.3 yards per carry on 14 carries, Sean. And, the Texans offensive line, maybe it was a little bit of them. I don't know if the running backs got the most out of what they could with some of those plays, but it was both ends. And that's the issue with the Texans, is that's the stuff that they're going to have to get better. But obviously you're going to see a lot more of Dameon Pierce running the football once we get into the regular season.
I got to go back and watch, for that kind of stuff, in terms of the run game and, why it was so flawed. But I will say this, particularly on that 11-play drive, the second series for the Texans and CJ Stroud. What I did like is it was a really well-balanced attack in terms of what they tried to do through the air and on the ground with the run. I thought what they did in the run game made the Dolphins respect what they had to do in the pass game. I mean, look, this is the first time I'd seen CJ Stroud himself run bootleg in this offense. I'd seen Davis Mills do it. I'd seen Case Keenum do it. I hadn't seen CJ Stroud do it, and it looked natural. It looked good. And I think Mike McDaniel's a genius. He's smart in many, many more ways than just football smart. He respects the athleticism and the talent that maybe a lot of people sleep on with CJ Stroud. And I guarantee you that he probably made sure his defense understood that, hey, you got to respect what this guy can do with his legs. If he gets loose on the edge, he'll pull it down and make some runs. He did it in joint practices this week. So
yeah, that's what I was going to ask you that. Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Are you seeing, because we haven't seen it really in these preseason games, are you seeing design runs for CJ Stroud in these practices?
Not designed. I can't tell you 100% if I'd seen a designed run, but what I think I've enjoyed, and I'll put it this way, like respected about CJ's game, is that while, look, yes, it's fair to criticize him for holding the ball too long. He just wants to freaking make a play. I've seen a number of times, not just this week in the joints, but throughout camp. Hell, the first snap that CJ Stroud took in preseason with the ones, he pulled it down and ran and got like a 19-yard gain. Okay. And that wasn't like, would that have been a sack? No, it was, he recognized my read's not there. I'm pulling it down. I'm going. I've seen that a number of times. So I liked the instinctual football that CJ Stroud has played with in camp. And I think, you got to see a little bit of that elusiveness, a little bit of that propensity to I can make this play. I can make this play, but it's not a silly, it's not like he's trying to force anything. Again, the ball that he, tried to get to Noah Brown on that sliding attempt that hit him right in the chest, right through his hands. Maybe a play Noah Brown should make, but CJ Stroud set that up, spun out of the pass rush, made a hell of a throw. Extended play. What we haven't really seen is him step up in the pocket. And that's not necessarily his fault, because a lot of the pass rush that he's faced is coming right up the damn middle. There ain't nowhere for him to step up. It's, you got to get out left or right and make a quick decision. So just time on that one.
Any comments? Let us know, because we're going to be out of here in a few minutes if there is no comments. Last thing I want to touch on, Sean, we didn't have to mention penalties last week at all. But Sean, 7 penalties this week, 7. And I just felt like there were some big ones in those 7 penalties too. Yeah,
that's a problem. And it comes down to just discipline, with guys. I kind of want to go back and see like exactly who was making those, the bulk of those penalties, because when you get in a preseason game, guys are, fighting for jobs and just kind of going all out, fighting for position. And so they're going to do some things. They're going to try to get away with some things that maybe the refs won't catch in the game, but your coaches are damn well going to let you hear about it on film, the following day. That can happen sometimes. So, a lot of the holds, a lot of the false starts, like anything like that, you're just trying to gain a slight advantage against your opponent. Like, I don't necessarily worry about a lot of those because it's the preseason. It's, the guys that should know better, your starters, your veterans. And again, that's something I'd have to go back and look at because I can't remember them off the top of my head. If it's one thing if it's like Laramie Tunsil, false starting early, that kind of a thing. It's like, come on, dude. And we saw that last year. I think he probably led the damn league at his position in false starts. That's something that's got to improve with him specifically. But yeah, the penalties, it's always a concern. It's always something that, just angers you a little bit as a coach, because they always believe, you're athletic enough to make that play. You don't need to do that. You don't need to create this advantage. Like, you've already got it. Just be in position. So I think that's something that's going to maybe be a hallmark, or at least needs to be emphasized. A part of a DeMeco Ryans defense, particularly, is one that's well disciplined and trusting the defense, because it's been a pretty consistent theme so far that they made plays in camp because This scheme allows them to make plays in camp. They're in the right position to make plays. They got to trust that.
Noel Mo 2000 says drops were killer. We talked about that earlier, but yeah, that was an issue. There was a bunch of them. Schultz needed to finish running that route. He says,
yeah,
well, I don't know what the design on the route was, and we don't know.
No, it looked like it, but yeah, it was a miscommunication in some regard. And maybe CJ addressed that, at the podium. I don't know what he'd said. I have to believe that he probably did. And knowing CJ, he probably put it on himself. So, we'll see. Hopefully that's something they correct.
Yeah, we may never know exactly what was what. Guys don't like to point fingers. That's kind of the deal. Shaun, anything else that comes to mind? Anything that you got from the locker room? I know a lot of the guys were bailing on you pretty quick after the game, this preseason game. They wanted to get out of there.
No, nothing from the locker room. Just the only other thing that I'd say keep an eye on. Like, think about this. This is the most you're going to see your starters, presumably, right? This game today. So, for the people out there, the fans, watching, this is what you got. You probably ain't going to see very much, if hardly any at all in the third preseason game. But what you need to be watching for this week against the New Orleans Saints, really two position battles, tight end. Who's it going to be outside of the obvious Dalton Schultz and presumably Tegan Quatoriano? Again, Eric Tomlinson got a lot of run and looked really good in his opportunities this past week against the Dolphins with Mason Schreck, with Dalton Keene, which, he's there. But Nick Vannett, he's gotten a little bit of a run and, taking advantage of some opportunities. I'm looking at tight end. But most importantly, offensive line. I want to see these position battles, at the guard and tackle position, but specifically tackle, and how much time they're actually going to devote to Austin Deculus, who got the start in the second half with the Mills unit today at right tackle. He hadn't looked good at all. Looks very, very raw for a second-year pro, for a guy that, had an opportunity to get a lot of mental reps last year and take advantage of running with the ones this year. Didn't seize that opportunity. You had Dieter at center for your second unit today. You had Austin Deculus at right tackle. You had Killen Zier at left tackle. Jimmy Morrissey was playing guard, along with Jarrett Patterson, their 6th-round pick, who's also a guard center swing like Morrissey, like Michael Dieter. I want to see that position battle because with Titus Howard, I know he's in a softer cast again today. We'll see, how that continues. Maybe he's ready for week 1. Maybe he's not. But even if he is, you've got Titus Howard, you got Laramie Tunsil, and you've got George Fant. Those are your 3 guaranteed locks at tackle for the Texans. Well, who else is it? You need a backup if somebody goes down. Obviously, you don't really worry too much about Laramie, but you need a serviceable body. Is it going to be, Tyler Beach? Is it going to be Killen Zier? Is it going to be Rashad Coward? Is it going to be Austin Deculus? I don't know.
What's going on with Charlie? What's going on with Charlie Heck? I mean, is this a few days? Or is this a few months?
Hey, man, I didn't even mention him because the dude looks really good walking around out there. You just ain't seen him in football pads. I don't know what's going on with him, but I think they like him. It's just he might be a victim of circumstance and he'll make this team if I think like his injury is just not too serious, which I don't think it is, but he probably starts the year on IR if I have to guess, because they like him so much. I don't know. We haven't heard anything, and D'Amico doesn't talk about injuries, and Chris Strouser didn't say anything when I spoke to him exclusively a week and a half ago in regards to him. But it's just a wait and see, and you just see how thin they really are at that position. But it's important. They've got a lot of guys that can go center guard. I don't worry about that too much. I do worry about the fact that Kenyon Green, who started and played the whole time of the first team today, looked okay. Though I want to go back and look and see what he looked like in the pass rush when Stroud was flushed from the pocket a couple of times, and forced to make some errant throws on that second series or first series, whatever it was, in the red zone. But I just think that you need to watch the offensive line. That's where I think you're going to see maybe the most interesting, stash of guys, maybe a surprise cut going forward. August 29th, by the way, 3:00 Central Time is cut down day.
Yeah, one guy was asking here, Noel Mo was asking, have any of the undrafted free agents earned a spot? And so at whose expense? Anybody that you can think of that looks like they might have a shot?
Oh, undrafted free agents. Man, not off the top of my head, to be honest with you. If I can I give you one? And he showed you a little something today in the return game. Steven Sims. I think, look, NFL teams typically keep 6 receivers. I think Sims might be a 7th, maybe not just as a specialist specifically, but honestly as a guy that you could slide into that slot receiver role. Because to be honest with you, John Mechie's coming along a lot slower than I anticipated, and he's really flatlined over the course of the last 2 weeks. Robert Woods, solid. Tank Dell, you saw he was held out today, probably just as a precaution, but you could use a little bit of depth there and a guy that can consistently catch. Steven Sims had a horrible 2 weeks of training camp to start, but he has been on his game as a pass catcher. So he might be one guy to keep an eye on.
Is there a drastic difference between him and, say, Desmond King or Tank Dell? I mean,
in return,
yeah, because I don't see him keeping 3 little guys like that at receiver. Do you?
Well, Des King, and is a return guy. That's somebody that Frank Ross, their special teams coordinator, just really trusts. I mean, he's just so consistent. But Steven Sims, in that regard, you saw the wiggle, the quick burst, the quickness, lateral movement today, just making guys miss, lowering the shoulder, getting an extra 5-6 yards out of a play. I mean, that's what you like, and very similar to Tank Dell in that regard. But the biggest difference is Tank is a dude that just sees it and goes, and good luck catching them if you give him a little bit of a crease. I don't know how much we're going to see of Tank. I haven't seen him do too much, like flashy stuff in the return game. I know he had that 13-yard punt return against the Patriots last week, but I feel like that's Dez, and I feel like that's Steven. Good couple of options, change of pace guys there for Frank Ross to work with. But if Steven Sims makes this squad, it's going to be because he provides a little bit of depth at the receiver position as well, and he's earned it to this point.
Yeah, you and I, we're going to get later this week, we're going to get into maybe some more of the cut guys, because I know you've been sort of trying to sort that out as we are get closer and closer to the last preseason game.
I just want to say too, I apologize for not being off the top of my head, undrafted free agents. I got to have a list kind of in front of me, and I don't want to take the time, waste everybody's time right now looking at it, but nobody pops off the top of my head right now. And look, I did my mock 53 a couple of days ago, and I comfortably got to 50. And there's 3 spots where I'm like, and none of those guys, that I had, as for sure locks or even bubble guys were undrafted free agents, to my recollection. So I think it's a big week for those bubble guys. There's not a lot of them, but it's a big week, specifically offensive line, tight end, maybe wide receiver. We'll see what happens at the linebacker core. Christian Kirksey, according to the D'Amico Ryans update, 2 weeks ago, almost, he's supposed to be ready around the end of this next week, ahead of the Saints game. So we'll see. But right now, that dude feels like a cap casualty in a cut just because of the amount of money the Texans could save, which is an upwards of $6 million. So don't be surprised that if he's not wearing a Texans uniform, though, don't be surprised if he is, just because of the linebacker core, and the lack of depth there. Looks really good sometimes in practice, but experience does matter. Veterans do matter. Healthy bodies matter more, though. And so you're going to have to see how they weigh, your Blake Cashman, who wasn't active today. He had soft tissue issue, I think, with his hamstring, kept him out today. Henry To'oTo'o. A lot is not expected of this guy right now, even though he's looking like he could step in. Got some run with the ones today, but you saw some of the errors, the mental errors, and the shortcomings of a young player in a new defense for him today. So maybe Christian Kirksey does find a way on this roster if he's healthy, really healthy.
Just the last thing I'll say real quick, and then you can finish up before we close it out. The Texans have one preseason game left to go. They didn't look good in this one, and the backups really look bad. And I assume we're going to see a lot of the backups in the third preseason game fighting for roster spots like we typically do in the last preseason game. So, I mean, I'm not expecting to look at the last preseason game and go, oh, I'm way more excited about the season than I was after this preseason game. Unless CJ Stroud they play him and he has a big first quarter quarter and a half or however long they want to play him.
Yeah, you're gonna see a lot of Davis Mills and potentially EJ Perry in that third preseason game. Though I say that kind of tongue in cheek. What Case Keenum hasn't practiced in about 4 days. Maybe it's been longer than that. I'm clearly since the Patriots game, he's got the sleeve on his left leg, some soft tissue injury there. Maybe they're just being precautious because they know they're going to need him for that third preseason game, or at least they'd like to have him maybe get some more run. I don't know. I wouldn't mind seeing a lot more Davis Mills because I don't know, ultimately, none of us do, their thinking in terms of how they're going to proceed. CJ Stroud, definitely QB1. Case Keenum is going to be on this team. Hopefully he's healthy enough to, be able to step in if needed. If Davis Mills continues to show this type of improvement and comfortability within this offense, and that he does belong somewhere in some role in this league, Texans going to go with 3 quarterbacks. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they do. We see teams do it every once in a while. The Patriots did it last year. 49ers obviously did it last year for different reasons, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But you're going to see a lot of 2s and 3s. And I just don't think that game ultimately is going to mean, jobs are being won and lost against the Saints, because the joint practices, the coaches have talked about it a number of times. They mean more to them than really these preseason games do because of the controlled environment, because it is legitimate 1v1. It's the last opportunity you're going to get to see it before the regular season.
Yeah, we should mention, those scrimmages are coming up against the Saints this week too. So that's absolutely a huge thing. And unfortunately, everybody can't be out there to watch those preseason games. I know we would all like to be out there in the 110-degree heat watching what's going on, but we just can't do it. Just a reminder to everybody that's out there watching, listening, tell your friends, Shaun, he's got the insight. He's out at NRG. He's out at practice. Great inside stuff. We do post games throughout the season, live post games. It'll be an hour to an hour and a half after the game, following the home games. The road games, we'll try to get you right after the game. So just to keep that in your notes and tell your friends about us, tell your relatives, tell your coworkers that we're the place to go for Astros, Rockets, and Texans. That's all for this one. We out.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, you can support the show by subscribing on YouTube and commenting on the videos. Listen to Houston Sports Talk on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, and Google. Don't forget to tell a friend and share our show on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.